Hello Whisky fans, you all know what time it is. It's that time of the year for Feis Ile, the annual, or almost annual, COVID permitting, festival they have on the Isle of Islay to celebrate whiskey and music and food and having a good time, getting around, sharing a dram or two. Feis Ile used to be something that I used to get really excited about. You often get some really good whiskies coming from the distilleries. In the past they were more often distillery exclusives that you had to travel to Islay in person to buy. These days, I think largely down to COVID and the fact that there's so much money to be made in it, you quite often get them available online, although saying that the good, or more likely the desirable ones, can be very, very hard to get hold of. But I am a little bit less enthusiastic about Feis Ile these days than I used to be, because it's like everything in whiskey, it's getting bigger and bigger, more and more people are getting onto it, and quite frankly, prices are going up and up. And I want to just mention some tweets, a conversation that happened on Twitter. There's a Twitter user that I follow called PS Whisky, and he made a tweet back when Bunnahabhain made the announcement of their 3 Feis Ile bottlings for this year, and he pointed out, and he quite often talks a lot of sense, especially regarding the prices and availability and the hysteria about modern whiskey releases. He pointed out how ridiculous it is that this year Bunnahabhain expect us to buy a 23-year-old Bunnahabhain for Feis Ile retailing at £400. And to be perfectly honest, I absolutely agree with him. I think that £400 is far too much for any bottle of whiskey, but especially when it's a 23-year-old whiskey and it's a current release. It's not like a rare sought-after antique bottle or anything like that. It's just a 23-year-old bottle of whiskey, £400. I'd say that that's far overpriced, probably twice the price that it should be. And I actually replied to PS Whisky on Twitter saying something along the lines of, I absolutely love Bunnahabhain, because I do, I always have. I've really loved almost everything that they've done ever since they changed to 46.3% ABV non-chill filtration. But, and I said this on Twitter, I've never bought a Feis Ile bottle of Bunnahabhain because it always just seems far too expensive for what you get. So what I've done this year, because I do love to try special edition whiskies, especially when they're festival bottlings. I think everyone gets a little bit excited about Islay whiskey in general, but at this time of year you've always got new special releases coming thick and fast, and they're always interesting, even if, and this is the case with Ardbeg in particular, which I've mentioned before, they are bloody overpriced. So what I've done this year, rather than shell out for a whole bottle, to their credit, absolutely to their credit, Bunnahabhain have released a lot of their whiskies, I think all of them for Feis Ile, as 30ml samples, and I absolutely love that. They've got no need to do that. They don't need to offer these as little tasters so we can try it without buying a full bottle. They could just screw us over, as almost all the distilleries do, and force us to either miss out or take a gamble blind, if you're not there in person, on the expensive bottle just to have the chance to try it and see what it's like. So really hats off to Bunnahabhain for offering these as samples. It's rare that we get that opportunity. So having these 3 samples, I'm obviously going to do a little mini-series of Bunnahabhain Feis Ile releases. I'll just go through the range, but we're going to be starting with the younger one. We're going to work our way up over the next 3 videos basically. I will say at this point that I did actually buy a full bottle of Bunnahabhain, and it is a special one, and it's a bottle that I thought probably stood a better chance of being a really standout whiskey than these Feis bottles. So after I've done these 3, I will reveal that bottle that I bought on the Bunnahabhain website, and we'll have a look at that as well. So Bunnahabhain Feis releases from this year, you've got a no age statement, which sort of unusually for Bunnahabhain. It's not a peated Munya release. This year it's an unpeated release, and that's Avin Araig. I don't think that's going to focus. I haven't got time for that. So Avin Araig is no age statement. It does actually say that on all of these that they're natural colour and non-chill filtered, so that's amazing. And the Avin Araig, it's a sherried Bunnahabhain bottled at 50.8% ABV. So that's your cheap option, cheap, coming in at £95. So working our way up, we have a Bunnahabhain Muinne release, so that's peated Bunnahabhain. It's a 2004 Muinne Tokay cask finish whisky. So that is a peated Bunnahabhain, but with a Tokay Hungarian sweet white wine cask finish applied to it. And that one's bottled at 52.2% ABV. So all good ABVs on these. And lastly, the Tokay finish, that comes in at £199 for a bottle. And lastly, the crown jewel of the Bunnahabhain Feis releases for 2022, we've got a 1998 Calvados cask finish. So that's a very exciting one. Calvados cask finishes, apple brandy, only very recently been made legal by the SWA. So Bunnahabhain almost certainly didn't plan this one. They've obviously had some whisky maturing in their warehouses, and they've selected that for a finishing period in that apple brandy cask. So that'll be a very interesting one to have a look at, especially seeing as I've recently done the review for the Kilchoman Mezcal finish whisky release, which is a Whisky Exchange exclusive. If you haven't seen that and you want to see a review of one of these whiskies matured in some of these unique brand new cask finish types, go and have a look at that video. And got to mention the price. This is the one that PS Whisky was talking about on Twitter. 1998 Calvados cask finish, retails for £400. Anyway, I'm going to put those two expensive little buggers aside for the moment, and we'll take a look at the no age statement Feis Ile 2022 Avin Araig. So Avin Araig, translated into English, means the Araig River. So this is one of those nice little things that a lot of distilleries have done, like Ardbeg did it with their Loch Ugadal releases and things like that. This is Bunnahabhain paying a little tribute to their water source. The Araig River is a tributary of the Margadale River, and the Margadale is the water source for the Bunnahabhain distillery. Anyone that's familiar with Islay and that sort of northeast corner of Islay where Bunnahabhain and Killeela are, will know that there's also a loch nearby Bunnahabhain called Loch Stoisha. And Stoisha is going to be a place name that's familiar to anyone that likes their independently bottled Bunnahabhain. So this release, the Avin Araig, is a no age statement release. So a little bit disappointing that they're selling us a whisky for £95 and they're not even telling us that it's 3 years old. But what they are telling us that it's matured in ex-bourbon casks and European oak PX octave casks. So an octave cask is a very, very small cask. It's usually either assembled from virgin oak or sometimes from trimmed down and reassembled casks, staves from other casks. And an octave cask is around about half the size of a quarter cask, with a quarter cask rather confusingly being half the size of the most common cask used in whisky, the ASB American Standard Barrel. Quarter cask being called quarter cask because it's a quarter of the size of a sherry butt. Although confusingly we are seeing some slightly smaller octave casks these days, we are seeing some octave eighth size casks which are an eighth of an American Standard Barrel. We're also told that this is an unpeated whisky. It's 50.8% ABV, natural colour, non-chill filtered, £95, which I think is very expensive for a no-age statement whisky, but sadly not really too surprising for what we're seeing these days. £95 for a no-age statement release, kind of in line with a lot of other Feis Ile releases, especially when you look at what we're getting from Ardbeg these days. So Avin Araig, Bunnahabhain Feis Ile 2022. Let's get some in the glass. See if it's any good. Can't say enough how pleased I am that Bunnahabhain have given the option of these samples. So the colour of this one, we know that it's natural colour, non-chill filtered. So we don't know the age. We can assume that you'd like to think that if it was as old as the standard 12, they would have probably said so. So that makes you think that it's probably considerably younger than the 12-year-old. Now, why they've done that, you obviously don't want whiskey to be spending too long in something as small as an octave cask, especially if it's fresh wood, because that's going to get very oaky very quickly. But we know this has been in bourbon casks and European oak casks as well, so I would suspect that it's probably been finished in those Pedro Jimenez octave casks, so that's not really an excuse. So sadly, it does kind of seem to me that they are just kind of gouging us a little bit on the price with this one. Anyway, on the nose. Instantly recognisable as Bunnahabhain, so lots of notes on the nose of this one similar to the 12-year-old. I'd say that it's just that little bit flatter and less sweet than the 12-year-old. I'm also getting a surprising spiciness on the nose of this one. I think that you often get a spicy note on a lot of Bunnahabhains because they do use those sherry casks, but with this one, getting distinct notes of curry spices, cumin, lots and lots of heavy cumin on the nose of this one. I'd actually say that it's very rare that I've ever noticed such an obvious curry powder note on the nose of any whiskey. Also getting some gingery, raw oak, a little bit of cinnamon, as well as the normal Bunnahabhain notes that you always get, like milk chocolate and fruity grape type notes. Raisins perhaps. But I definitely think that this smells younger than the 12-year-old, and I'd say that probably largely down to that youth, it seems a bit more neutral than the 12-year-old. Let's see how it tastes. So again, obviously a Bunnahabhain. In a blind taste test, a lot of people are going to identify this as a Bunnahabhain. Lovely, sweet, malty notes, quite oaky, again getting quite a lot of wood spice, probably from those European oak octave casks. Also getting some licorice on the palate of this one, but again definitely flatter, and I think obviously younger than the standard 12-year-old Bunnahabhain. As for the finish, I'm going to say medium length, malty with a little bit of bitter oak. The thing that surprises me most about this whiskey, if you read what they say on paper and you assume that it's younger than the 12-year-old, it's basically what you would expect for a younger Bunnahabhain 12 stuck into a very small active cask. But the ABV of this one at 50.8, I do find this curiously light for a whiskey with that high ABV. As for a grade, I'm going to give this one a C. So that's a decent grade, but it's not the kind of grade that you want for a whiskey that you have to pay £95 for. So that raises the question, is this Bunnahabhain Feis Ile Abhainn Araig, is it worth the price? I'm going to go out there and say it's 100% not worth it. I think that this is a good whiskey. I'm very happy that I've got this, and I'm really enjoying drinking it. But I think it's not even as good as the standard 12-year-old, which is far, far cheaper. Actually, it reminds me quite a lot of the Bunnahabhain Styradar. It's kind of like the Styradar, which itself is it's literally a cheaper, more economical production, no-age statement of the 12-year-old. Reminds me of that a lot, just perhaps with a little bit of extra spice. Now, as I said, I really appreciate that Bunnahabhain have done these samples. It's really great that lots of people can try this at an affordable price. And to be honest, I do kind of like that there's 3 options as well. 3 options, different casks. If you really don't like a wine finish, then you've got options. If you really don't like peated whiskey, you've got options. If you're on a budget, if you can call spending £95 on a whiskey having a budget, then there's an option for that. But as good as it is to have 3 different price levels for these Bunna releases, I still think that it's still bloody expensive, and worse than that, I think that this Abhainn Araig is kind of bad value. But still, if you don't take the price into consideration, a C is still a good grade from me. I think that C is a good whiskey. But fingers crossed from the other 2 Feis releases from Bunnahabhain that we'll get something better with the more expensive releases. Thanks for watching, and cheers.
Islay.